Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all keeping well. Welcome to another episode of the Beyond the BSc Horizon project. So today's episode, we have very special guest. I'm a bit nervous because they're my conveners. But we have special guest today from the Department of Pathology. So on my left, we have Dr. Melissa joining us. And then next to her, we have Prof. Burgers joining us. How are you guys feeling today?
Good.
Thank you, Blessing.
Firstly, thank you. I know you have very busy schedules, but thank you for making the time to shoot the podcast. So before we get into it, I was trying to think of a nice icebreaker question for people from pathology. And then I don't know if this is going to be appropriate, but like, what is your favorite pathogen? What does it do? And why is it your favorite?
Well, get us started, maybe. So, I'm incredibly biased because I do research on HIV. Mm-hmm. I would have to say it is my favorite from the perspective of the challenge it is in terms of trying to find a vaccine, for example. It's we've not really had anything that's kept us on our toes, I think, to this extent, 40 years of research towards a vaccine. We're always learning new things all the time. And I think for that reason, it has been my favorite in terms of trying to really just find ways around getting a vaccine and a cure.
Okay, that's a cool one.
Like Melissa, I also work on HIV, so she took mine. But I have a love-hate relationship with HIV because we haven't been able to make a vaccine. So I guess my second one would be SARS-CoV-2 that caused the COVID pandemic, because I've spent a solid 5 years of my life, the last 5 years, working on this virus. And the reason it's better than HIV is because we were actually able to make a vaccine in a very short time and learn a lot about the virus. I mean, it was an emergency to do so because it's quite an easy virus to vaccinate against. So I think that's become my new favorite.
Okay, that's really cool. I love HIV, but SARS-CoV-2 is pretty cool too. Yeah, it's pretty cool too. So maybe we can start by you guys explaining what is the Department of Pathology? Like, what do you guys do in the Department of Pathology? Maybe to people that don't even know, like, there's a Department of Pathology.
Right, so it's a department in the Faculty of Health Sciences at UCT. So we're located not on Upper Campus, but right next to Groote Hospital in Observatory. One of many departments like medicine and so on at Faculty of Health Sciences. And we're made up of a whole bunch of divisions, so departments, divisions, and we're both from the Division of Medical Virology. And there are other divisions like microbiology, immunology, genetics, and various others. And it's more the laboratory sciences of medicine. So we do research, but also diagnostic work. So for example, in our division, medical virology, we're not just doing research, but there's also the NHLS labs that do, for example, all the virology tests in the country, like HIV tests or viral loads and CD4 counts and things like that. So we're the nice thing is that it's a mixture of like working virology, how it's applied in the medical field, but also all the kinds of research on virology that we do.
Okay. Do you have anything to add?
I think Prof. Burgers covered that really well. It is a sort of a diversity of different substreams within pathology. And one of the nice things is that with a basic sciences degree, for example, or what you might learn at an honors level, a lot of the techniques are quite broadly applicable to the different streams. So you can carry over certain techniques across those streams, which means you're not really restricted in terms of...
Okay. So then if you can reflect back to when like you were coming into university, I know that's a long time ago. So what coming from Matric, what type of a student were you, and how did that play a role in influencing like your future career endeavors? Yeah.
Okay, so from my perspective, I was, I'll be honest, I was more academically inclined. I was not a sporty student at all. I did have more of an aptitude for the biological sciences. So I think it was sort of a natural selection, no pun intended, for me to choose something in the biological sciences when I got to university level. And yeah, more so than sort of the maths and the physics side, I really did find learning things about biological organisms and how they function a lot easier for me to grasp those concepts when I was in high school. So I think it was sort of a natural progression for me to do basic sciences.
Okay.
For me, I fell in love with HIV when I was at school. So that's my love affair goes back a long time. And it was because this tiny organism that was discovered caused such havoc. You know, you could get so sick and you could die, and many people could die from this tiny thing that's not even really a cell, you know, that hijacks our body. And for me, this was such a fascinating thing. And it's not that we really learned about HIV that much at school, but it was in the news and so on. So for me, that was just like, okay, I've got to do whatever it is that gets me to work on this pathogen. And so that was sort of my driving force. But I was also quite a diligent, hardworking student, but it was mostly because I was super shy. And so I would rather just spend time with my books rather than people because it was so awkward. And I didn't even get that much better coming to university. But I did my high school in Gauteng, and we had lived in Cape Town when I was a kid. And sometimes we would drive past the highway just under UCT here. And since I was a tiny kid, I was like, I want to go there. It looks amazing with the ivy on the walls. And so, you know, that's what I kind of after matric or during matric, I applied to UCT to do a BSc. And at that time, MCB here offered microbiology and biochemistry. So that's what I did. And, you know, we didn't do much on HIV until third year. So I had to, you kind of have to slog through first year, which was, you know, I may have been a diligent student at school, but I had no idea how much work university was. So I enrolled in microbiology and biochemistry BSc in MCB here, and it fulfilled my dream of coming to UCT. But first year was extremely difficult, and only in actually third year when we did virology were we really doing something more exciting, except mostly plant viruses. And it was in that year actually that my best friend and I, who were doing the same course, actually decided that we wanted to do, well, we knew we wanted to do medical research, and that's when we started exploring beyond upper campus, where do we go to do medical research and continue our degrees there.
Okay. That is very cool in the sense of like how your interests from high school get to influence what you're going to love in uni. And also I think everyone feels the same about first year. First year is just... First year is something else, never to be repeated. But yeah. So then I think to most BSc students, maybe like myself, people in final year, we found it hard, like having to be under so much pressure to apply for postgrad. And you're starting to wonder, like, what do I want to do? Because people like your lecturers in MCB, like my lecturers, they were emailing me saying, we hope you are considering MCB. I'm like, I'm still thinking. And then people like in neuroscience, like, we hope you come into neuroscience. And then I'm like, okay, so how do you get to like ground yourself and decide, okay, this is what I want to follow? Because I think it's a scary step for all of us. And also the misconception of people thinking like, if I do honors in pathology, I'm stuck with that for life. Do you have any advice around navigating around those feelings?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think just to start with the last part that you mentioned about the concern about being stuck with something for life, what I mentioned earlier regarding streams within pathology and the skills that you require, and more broadly, what you do get, for example, with an honors or master's postgraduate studies in our streams is learning strong analytical skills, how to assimilate information from scientific papers, how to produce scientific writing, and the laboratory skills, as I mentioned, are also quite transferable. So you're not restricted in that sense. Your skills are actually broadly applicable. Even analytical thinking, critical thinking are applicable outside of our sort of sciences as well. So I think you need to think of it from that perspective. Your skills are actually quite valuable in a broad realm of different fields. In terms of making that decision, that is a really hard one. I think trying to make yourself as informed as possible about each stream, but not only just about what the stream is about, but also speaking to people who are doing postgraduate studies in that stream, or people at different levels, something like much like what you're doing at the moment, learning what their job is about, and on a sort of granular level, even if you can, like ask them, what do you do day to day? What are your activities? Getting to understand what it's really about can actually help inform if this is something that you would like, or you see yourself in that kind of a position one day. So yeah, I think that's the kind of advice that I would
Okay.
give.
Do you have anything to add, Prof. Burgers?
Yeah, absolutely. To visit labs as well. I have 2 students from our undergraduate pathology class coming to my lab next week. And they're just going to stay a week, but they were just wanting to know, like, can I peer into the black box, which is research? Because that's not what you've been doing in undergrad. You've been learning about research,
Yes.
but you haven't been doing it. You maybe done some practicals, but that doesn't sort of put it all together for you. So I think it is such an important choice because honors is really difficult. So we talked about the change from matric to first year, and then that's the other like really, really hard leap from undergrad to honors. So what your podcast is fabulous. What we did in our third year also, we had exactly the same problems, the same issue that students have every time. We invited lecturers from, at that time there wasn't a pathology course, so we invited lecturers from medical school to come and talk to us and tell us about their programs. But I think the idea about talking to postgrads is actually really great because we forget, it's a long time since we were in postgrad. And so I think we should involve our postgrads to come and actually talk to you guys more.
I think that would be really helpful because I feel like it's a lot of pressure also trying to deal with final year, getting good grades because you're graduating and now you need to apply for funding and then they're stuck not knowing what to do. So maybe while we're on that, I'll give it to Dr. Melissa to maybe to anyone like who's going to be coming to UCT, maybe tell them about the third year pathology course, and then Prof. Burgers, if you can tell them more about the second year pathology course, and maybe to be biased, obviously, maybe why they should do it. Because from my side, since I did both the courses, I'm biased, obviously, but I think it's pretty cool. But I think hearing from the course conveners, that will raise more awareness as to why should they take the second year and the third year pathology course. Yeah.
Can I start with the second year so
Yes.
that we go in that order?
Yes.
So we started quite a few years ago. This is the 5th year that we've run the course. And for Melissa, it's the 2nd year that she's run the 3rd year one, and they go on after each other. So we had the idea quite some time ago, and it was many years in planning, to do exactly what we had missed in our undergrad, which was showcase more of the medical sciences. And as I told you, learning about plant virology was thrilling, but not exactly what I wanted to work on. And so we felt at that time it was missing. I think there's a little bit more of the medical sciences now in the BSc, MCB degree.
Yeah, there is, because now it's quite broad. We do like a lot of viruses.
Yes, yeah. And you also have some lecturers who actually used to work in the Faculty of Health Sciences, so their background is actually medical also. So we wanted to promote learning about infectious diseases. One of the reasons being, and in immunology, which is a core discipline to understand in infectious diseases. And one of the impetus for it is that, we have a world that's changing with a lot of pressure on the environment, and we have so many emerging pathogens. And, the pandemic that we just lived through, we launched our course in the first year of the pandemic and had to teach it online way back in 2020. And that's just an illustration of how viruses, pathogens, immunology, vaccines are part of our lives. And the whole world was doing an infectious disease course for that year. So we had no problem actually for our students being interested. So we're just offering the 2 pathology courses at the moment as electives, as we hope to build up, and it takes many years, the pathology up to a major that health sciences offers for BSc students. And so far we feel like we've had a lot of interest. The first course is infectious disease and vaccines. Each of the course we try to teach some of the basic biology as well as show a very important application. So in the case of case of the first course, it was vaccines, and Melissa will let you know about the second course. And such is what the same thing as what we've planned for the two later courses that will complete the 2 second years and 2 third years for a major. We also wanted to do something a little bit different, which we've tried to do in both courses, which is not just talk about the hard science, which, you know, there's plenty of that, but also put particularly infectious diseases in the context of the social and economic and political context in which they live, because that very much influences what you can do with infectious diseases. So, for example, you can make, as a scientist, you can make a vaccine, but if there isn't the economic situation, if countries are too poor to buy it, then your wonderful translation of the science comes to nothing.
Yeah.
And we know there are many socio-political issues around HIV, TB, and any infectious disease that you can think of. So that was something slightly different that we wanted to do. And also give students right from their second year and third year some skills. So for example, I never wrote an essay at all in my BSc undergrad. I never read a research paper. And these are things that you do in honors. And that's why the transition is so difficult, because you immediately have to use skills that you haven't actually gained in your undergraduate. So we've tried to incorporate some things like that, some starting to access the scientific literature, understand what it is and so on, because I was completely at sea when I got into honors and someone said, here's a paper. I didn't know what a paper was. I didn't know what a journal was, you know, all of that kind of thing. So we've tried to just look back at what we thought were the gaps in our undergrad and start filling those with some really interesting infectious disease topics.
Yes, so as Wendy said, the third year course is really building on that basis that the second year course lays, which is essentially you would now have an understanding of what is a virus, what a pathogen does in terms of the immune system, the basic cells of the immune system, etc. And the third year course really tries to build on that now, to look at how pathogens cause disease within the body. It's really only with that understanding of how a certain pathogen functions, what it does to the body, that we can actually intervene and design ways of treating, of curing, etc. And so the third year course really delves into things like the life cycles, how certain pathogens replicate, what that does in terms of stimulating a response, immune response in the body, how the body tries to control or eliminate, and how we can use that to inform targets for vaccines and also for treatment. We also try to build on those skills, like Wendy mentioned, thinking along the lines of what you might need to do in a job one day or in postgraduate studies. Those critical sort of analytical skills that I mentioned earlier. We're really trying to build on that by now giving students a paper to sort of make their own. You cannot critically analyze or critique something unless you really understand it. So we try and build on those skills of really interpreting data, communicating what you see in terms of results, and really thinking about it critically and trying to see what areas could be improved upon, what was missed, what was lacking. And that really gets your mind into that frame of critical thinking that is a very valuable skill going forward for postgraduate studies and research in general.
And life.
And absolutely. So yeah, we really do try and build on that as well, and also bring in a little bit about the aspects of plants that and the roles they might play in natural substances in the development of drugs, for example, that are used in treatment, and understanding some of those challenges with regards to drug development, which is a whole sort of stream on its own, field on its own. So we try to also bring in a little aspect of it's not just maybe And yeah, so we really try and build on that and hopefully provide valuable skills going forward for the students.
Yeah, I think that's very important because I feel like you're saying, like, because I've been talking to people in honors and how most of them, they say like it's such a big leap having to, like, now you're doing research, you have to now critically analyze a paper, you have to summarize it, you have to write an abstract. And I feel like if in undergrad we incorporate more of those skills so that you practice beforehand, then I feel like the transition into honors will be a lot easier, because at the end of the day, as a scientist, you have to know how to do research, you have to understand the paper and things like that. My opinion is biased, but I recommend taking the courses because I took them. So maybe while we're on that, I feel like also another concern for a BSc student is, okay, will I find a job? So then do you mind then maybe expanding on, like, what can you do then, like, with your degree, like maybe after being, like, doing honors and postgrad in the Department of Pathology, what are your career options? How are they looking like?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a concern, especially nowadays. I mean, I guess it always has been. So the BSc is not a professional degree in the sense that it's not medicine or engineering where you're going to come out and you're going to be a doctor or an engineer and you have a certain way forward and the country needs doctors and engineers and you'll get a job. So the country does need scientists, but there's a much less clear route. So you don't come out really as a scientist after a BSc because you've not been practicing science, which is research. And so that's why we do encourage students to get their honors, because that's their first taste of doing their own research project and producing their own data, analyzing it, interpreting it, putting it within the broader field, which is essentially what you do for honors, masters, PhD, what we do in all our research, just in a bigger or smaller way. So what we try to do, and I think we have done it a little bit in our undergrad courses. Melissa runs a small workshop on what are some of the different career options that there are, and she can tell you about those. Mm-hmm. There are a range simply because you're not stuck into one thing. So some of the fields you can go into is staying in academic research at a university. That's where most of the scientific research in our country happens. There's a small but growing biotech field where there are a few more companies that do make vaccines, make reagents, do research on various things, enzymes and so on drugs or treatments. So there's a small but growing biotech area. And then there's a major employer of scientists is the National Health Laboratory Service, which does all the laboratory diagnostics for the country. There are private pathology labs who also do the same, but for private. So those are some of the, I guess, more research-oriented careers. But with a BSc, you can also do a whole lot of other things. You may need to follow a few different routes and gain a few more skills. So, for example, you could teach science. You could write science. You know, there aren't very many science journalists in the country. When last did you open a newspaper and there was something interesting scientifically? So that's a career that maybe you need to combine with sort of an honors degree, perhaps, or some kind of other training in media. Science programs on TV, you know, so there's a lot of, if you also like me, I actually really loved the arts as well. So I took like some English courses and some literature courses and so on when I did my BSc. And so you can combine with things like that and use your science that way, because something that I realized during the pandemic, when a lot of people were coming to ask me, what's a virus? What's a vaccine? Are we all going to die from COVID? Was you realize that doing a BSc is such a privilege, because you get an understanding of science and DNA and cells that other people don't have. It's a complete black box to them. So you can actually apply that knowledge in a whole number of different ways. Having a podcast, which quite a few people do. There's some fantastic science podcasts to inform the public about that. So I think we can think about more than just the sort of traditional research careers, if that's not really what you necessarily want to do, but could also go into something more creative, something informing the public. There's also science advocacy. There's a whole range of different things that a science degree can give you the really good basis for.
What I'm getting from what you're saying is that people then need to understand that a BSc is very broad and diverse, and there are a lot of transferable skills. You don't have to go all the in academia. You can do a lot using your transferable skills.
100%. And you need to find that route, and it may require getting you some additional skills to combine with your science.
Okay. Dr. Melissa, do you have anything to add?
I mean, I think that when you covered that really thoroughly, the workshop that we host actually incorporates all of those, speaking about sort of different sectors, so to speak, whether you are working in research and development, which could be more industrial, so working for a company that maybe manufactures vaccines, for example, working for a company that produces kits or reagents that can be used by researchers in the lab, and that's if you want to sort of stay adjacent to the sciences, but not necessarily somebody who's in academia, if that's not really something that you feel is, you're being pulled towards. And of course, within the academic stream, even there are different levels and substreams within that. If you do feel academia, you are drawn to it, whether you want to be more along a teaching stream or more of a sort of research heavy post. I will say that within academia, it does involve being active in various things like social responsiveness, teaching, management, administration. So in itself, that is quite broad in terms of the roles that you play. If you do enjoy the laboratory, there are roles like scientific officers, but there are those that might find they like the operational or management side of things more. And so again, you're not necessarily going to be doing experiments if you don't love being at a lab bench, but you could be involved in helping a laboratory run, or helping on an institutional level with the skills that you've gained in your degree. So it really is a good exercise to sort of learn what different types of roles there are within different sectors.
Okay. So then maybe while we're on that, then in your opinion, what do you then think like high schools can do? Because I know like in high school, our career has always been about, you can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, you can be an engineer. And then you apply to university, like, okay, BSc. I mean, I applied, I didn't even know what I'm going to do in a BSc. Then you get to like, oh, and then as you go on to second year, they're like, oh, actually, I didn't know there's such a thing. So what do you think like high schools can incorporate in their career days to make students more informed? Because I remember on the UCT Open Day, someone on the Health Science UCT Open Day, they invited like high school students. Then I spoke to this one student, and then she was like, oh, I'm interested like in neuroscience, so I want to do medicine. Then I'm like, do you want to be a doctor, or are you interested like in the medical research side of things? Like, oh, is there a difference between the two? And then when I explained to them, like, okay, if you want to be a surgeon, that means 6 years, that means this, like, oh, I mean, like they are uninformed. So then what do you think high schools can do so that like they can incorporate informing students about like other things that are not professional? Because I also feel like that puts students under a lot of pressure, in the sense of like now, maybe when you apply for medicine as your first choice or engineering, then you get into a BSc, you sort of feel like, okay, am I really going to get a job? Because like this, what I'm doing, it was never, they didn't talk about it like during career days at high school. So what do you think schools can do to help students be better informed?
I mean, they can certainly invite scientists to kind of demystify a little bit about what we do, and so that people can see a scientist, and, they can invite scientists that look like us, and not necessarily, I think people, if they haven't met a scientist, you might have just like a movie view of some old guy or some weirdo, they're usually weird, in the lab who does strange experiments. So definitely, us or some of our postgraduate students who, can explain that, what you learnt in your textbook in science in high school, that was scientists who produced that knowledge. So not just coming afterwards and saying, here's a scientist, this is what they do, but also actually just that, we read a textbook and we think, oh, some old people sometime long ago produced this knowledge. Or if we even think that, we're just reading words on a page and it's difficult enough to learn and remember all that stuff. But if you just meta a little bit and think, who did this? How do you do experiments? How did they come up with this whole, you experiment and make observations and so on? So just the kind of a little bit pushing students or just enlightening them a little bit about how we found all this stuff. And that's what scientists do. And scientists, just like medicine, is one-on-one. So if I'm a doctor, I treat my patient and I treat maybe a few thousand patients in my lifetime. But as a researcher, you could develop something. You could do the experiments to develop a vaccine that can save millions, even billions of lives. So the power there, so just contrasting what is medicine versus research and scientific research, the power there to change lives and to help the world and serve humanity is enormous.
Absolutely. I agree. My initial thought was as well about inviting individuals who students can feel they can relate to. So I think that makes a huge difference. So somebody from a similar background or high school type of background who has had a path to a particular career, and to be able to tell their story, and this is what I was interested in when I was in high school, this is what I explored, this is what it's been like for me, the journey and getting to where I am at, I think would make it a lot easier for students to be able to see themselves in those kinds of roles, and much more relatable. So I think having people come out and speak, inviting individuals in certain fields would be very valuable.
As we're nearing the end of our podcast, I just want to ask, in terms of like aspiring postgraduate students, maybe like final year BScs or people going to final year next year, because I've always been curious, how do you draw the line? Like, how do you know, okay, should I just end at honors, or do I need to go all the way to PhD? Do I need to go to postdoc? How do you get to draw the line, like, okay, honors is fine, or do you need to go all the way to PhD and postdoc?
Okay, maybe I can start with that one. So certainly I would not go into it with the mindset that you would need to go all the way to PhD. I think it's about understanding that path. If you do see yourself as being a lecturer one day, and it depends on the stream as well. In the medical field, it might be different, that there's a requirement to maybe have, or in biomedical sciences, there may be a requirement to have a PhD to become a lecturer or associate professor, and therefore you would inform yourself about what is that postgraduate path that you need to take. But if you don't have that, that desire just yet, if you don't know if you'd want to teach one day necessarily, starting at the honors level, as Wendy mentioned earlier, it really provides you sort of a more focused look at what research is about. So coming from that broad BSc basis that you mentioned, and honors allows you to select something that maybe is of more interest to you, and to dig down a little bit deeper into that topic, learn what it is about to do research, to do scientific writing, scientific communication, all those various things. And that I think gets you a better sense of, do I like the lab? Do I like doing the technical aspects? Do I like the science? Do I like reading papers? That can be really challenging for a lot of us, just getting to that skill of reading a paper. So I think that gives you a much better insight into whether or not this is a realm that you'd like to be in. And it could be that after honors, you then would prefer to explore something more outside, like industry or a job per se. A master's sort of builds on your technical abilities more strongly. You become a lot more competent in the laboratory to maybe take on a role in terms of being employed within a laboratory or to support a research group, for example. A master's can really sort of help solidify those skills. But I always try and tell my students that when it gets to deciding on a PhD, any degree is a big decision, but PhD, you really want to sit and think very carefully. Is this for me? Is this really what I want? Don't think about it as just the next successive step, because that's the way it's put out as a progression of studies. Excuse me. Think about if there's a project you're interested in, or a subject that you really have a burning desire to know more about, to make your own, to really investigate that carefully before you consider going on to doing a PhD. So yeah, that's usually the advice that I give in that respect, because you do sort of put yourself, not necessarily, but a PhD could lead to a more academic path that you, if that is your interest, to be a postdoc. Do you want to run your own lab one day, have your own students? So that's really going to put you on that particular part more solidly if you do your PhD. But that may not be what you want. You may just prefer to work within a research group, to support a research group in a scientific officer role, for example, or even go out into industry. It's not to say that doing a PhD limits you from doing those things, going out into other sectors, but it is something I would say to think carefully on.
Okay.
I would just add that I would not worry too much, because honors really opens your eyes. You get a full immersion experience. So you're in the lab, having to generate your own data on your project, having to think about your results. And then you're also in a division or department where you're hearing about other people's results. You're seeing what the masters and PhD students and even postdocs, all of these things that you had no idea really what it was about. You're seeing it, and you can talk to your fellow students, and you also get a very mentored experience. So I think that we've called it fancy terms like postgrad and all of this, but it's basically just an internship. So you've done your 3-year science degree, you've got the basics, the theory mostly, and now you're doing an internship of what really is science, and honors is the first year of that. And so you get to see whether that is something you really like. And to be a professional, then you have to do more years of internship, which is master's and PhD. You can also stop though at honors and see what are the careers. Obviously, the further you go, other options open up. So, for example, in my lab, there's people with many different roles. My lab manager, who manages the research but doesn't actually initiate or do the research herself, has a master's. I have a project manager who coordinates all our mini studies. She does have a PhD, but she probably wouldn't have needed a PhD for the role that she's in. And then there are other early academics who are now onto postdoc and are working their way and would like to be lecturers and eventually professors and run their own groups. So I think it's about you'll know more, because there are many students who say, I'm going to do honors and then I'm going to go. And then they really love the research, the lab, the environment, and they love the fact that there's someone looking after you. You have a supervisor and a co-supervisor, and you have someone to always go to run your results by and to mentor you through, and you have that in master's and you have that in PhD. And so I always think it's like the opposite way around than it should be. You start off with your BSc and you're in a huge class and no one really looks after you and you kind of can get lost and it's difficult. Then you come into honors and masters and PhD and you have someone who's assigned for your academic development and yours alone. Well, they also have other students.
Yeah.
So it's not a journey. It's not a lonely journey. If you have a good supervisor, and there are many of those, and you can also supplement that with other mentors. There are many academics to actually help you through that journey and help you make those decisions about what do you really like, what are your skills, what have you picked up, what is it that you want to go into.
So it's more of like coming from being a number to being a student now.
Being a real person, yes.
So I think that would be very helpful, because I feel like for a lot of undergrad students like us, we always feel like there's this pressure from lecturers, no offense, that we should go all the way to PhD. That's why you always stress like, okay. But then I think it's more of like taking it one step at a time, and the journey will unfold as you go, and not just trying to digest everything. It's like, okay, now I need to do honors, masters. No, now you need to do honors. Let's focus on that. And then as time goes on, you'll see what to do. So like maybe in closing, as we save the best for last. So to aspiring postgraduate students out there, in your opinion, what's your comment on like the adjustment of undergrad students into postgrad, as you've seen many students come into your lab? Was it difficult? What challenges do you think they faced? And also like, what do you think they would have done different to sort of like maneuver those challenges better? And then also maybe lastly, then add like one piece of advice to maybe anyone who's looking to follow into your like career pathway.
Okay. Well, okay, maybe I can get started. So I think for me, from undergraduate to postgraduate, the transition was, I think, a little bit easier than for high school to undergrad transition. I think I was a little bit more familiar with the university environment, and it was sort of going from these big classes to now a smaller cohort of individuals, where I felt there was sort of a support system. We were doing a similar focused stream together, and I really enjoyed my honors year. Overall, it's a hard year. It's a lot of work, but I thoroughly enjoyed the experience. And the skills gained there. And as Wendy mentioned, in terms of support system, they are more sort of, you have your own supervisor, co-supervisor, individuals that are there to help you because they want you to do well and help you through that journey. So I did feel that so I adjusted from it was a different environment going to medical school. There was a bit of an adjustment to the new environment, but in terms of being part of a smaller cohort, a supportive group of students studying a focused subject, it was a good experience for me. And the second part of your question was advice.
Advice to anyone coming into postgrad, like what advice would you give them to sort of like maneuver those challenges, like in terms of adjusting?
Right.
What do you think they can do to help them?
Right. I think one thing is if you feel that you're struggling with anything, to not feel that you independently have to try again on your own and get something to work without reaching out. If you're stuck on anything, there are people there who have been where you are at, and to reach out and say, even if it's just a fellow postgraduate student sitting next to you in an office, or your supervisors, your co-supervisors, to say, to speak out sooner rather than later and say, I can't quite grasp this, I'm really struggling with this, can you help me? Help me to develop the skills that can ultimately help me do these things independently, but do not feel like you're going into something on your own and I have to make this work by myself and struggle and work long hours doing it on my own. Ask for help, I think, is a good thing. Speak to others, get a support system.
I think that's the biggest challenge among science students, given that mostly we base like our happiness on academic success, and we think like everyone got it under control. I'm the only one who's struggling. So I think asking for help, I think people need to realize that asking for help is a sign of strength instead of weakness, and the sooner you ask for help, the better. Yeah. You can move on to Prof. Burgers.
Yeah, I think I'll go on to the advice because it speaks to the challenges. So one of the key things that is different in honors is you are driving your learning. So you don't have lecturers anymore saying this is what we're doing today and these are the important things that you need to know. And, you've been conditioned for your whole academic life for someone to be in front of you to deliver content to you and kind of place that passively in your head, and there might be some active learning there if you have to go and read something or write something. So that's the flip for postgrad. You have to do that all yourself. There are a few theory lectures and some specialized content that is taught to you in honors. But the main thing about postgrad is that now you are responsible for your learning. So, for example, for your research project, you have to go and find papers. They're not provided for you that are relevant for your topic. And you might find papers that, your supervisor's not even aware about yet. Some research that was just published that's very relevant to your research. So I think if every honors student or every BSc student thinking about honors is taught that it's on you now. You're an adult. You have got your first degree. Whatever you do from now on, you're driving it. All the support systems are there for you to ask for help, for very experienced people to nurture you through the journey, but you're in the driving seat. And so that means you have to not fight it and to really own it and say, okay, what does it take? What's it going to take to do this? What it takes is a lot of hard work, discipline, reading, attending talks, talking to people, getting over yourself. I was extremely shy, as I mentioned, and I was very intimidated by my lecturers and supervisors, even though they weren't intimidating. And, but they were to me. So there are things that you have to push through professionally and personally. And whatever it takes to get over those things, because sometimes it's not just about convincing yourself. You have to do activities outside of your work to be able to get over yourself. And, maybe you have to go for therapy, which I did. There are all kinds of things where we're not just a scientist, we're people with all the things that actually, and now you're starting your journey. And it's owning that and driving it forward that I think is a very difficult transition to make, because you're still in an academic environment and you do still have people looking after you, but actually you have to do it and drive it.
I think you mentioned an important fact in the sense that now it's more of like you have to do everything by yourself and you have to utilize like the support structures that are around you and things like that. And then I feel like now it will then be the time whereby you really need to find a balance between like academics and the social life. Because I feel like people have this misconception of like scientists are weirdos, they don't have a, do they really have a life? And like now you really need to find a balance between those two. Yeah. So as you've seen, guys, they're really lovely people. They've given you nice advice. So definitely take the course. Take the course. They're going to take care of you. So I don't know. Do you have anything to add? Maybe something additional comments that you want to add?
Just to say thank you for the invitation to speak, and just to congratulate you on it's a good endeavor to learn more about the basic sciences options.
Okay.
And that we're in your corner, we're rooting for your success. So whether as the students in our class, if you carry on with honours or not, or further than that, we're not here as stumbling blocks, we're here for your success. We really want to teach you and nurture you and grow you as people and scientists. So thank you so much for having us on your podcast. Blessing.
Thank you so much. I should be saying thank you so much for allowing me to interview you guys. So that is it from today. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you guys are going to enjoy this episode, and until next time.